Hi, I'm Jamie and welcome to the CDNify podcast. Today I'm joined by Ben, our front-end developer, and we're going to be chatting with Chris Coyier. A little background about Chris. He works as a web designer over at CodePen, crafting his designs with front-end languages like CSS and JavaScript. He's also a writer at CSS-Tricks, discussing the latest practices, tools, and ways to improve performance. Chris is also a podcaster on the Shop Talk Show, which discuss front-end web design, development, and UX. Today we're going to be chatting about modern front-end development practices, user experience, and accessibility. So, Chris, do you mind telling everyone a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. That was a great intro. Thank you for that. Nailed it. That's just what I do. I don't even have too much to add to that, really. But yeah, CSS-Tricks is where I kind of write about the web and stuff. Mm-hmm. And CodePen is my little startup company that I do with a couple other friends of mine, Tim and Alex. So there's three of us that work there building that. And that's kind of where most of my time is these days. And yeah, and Shop Talk that I do with Dave Rupert, where it's just, it's like the talking version of CSS-Tricks, I guess.
That sounds really good. I was actually reading CSS-Tricks recently, and I saw the post about the icon system you mentioned, using inline SVG instead of an icon font.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting. You mentioned it has to be loaded into the DOM, so it can't be cached. Do you think this is sort of like the way forward for, icons instead of using, an icon font? Or, because it looked really interesting to me.
Yeah, I do think it's probably the future. Maybe not exactly how it's laid out in that article, because the article is kind of like, you can do this today and here's how. But the overall concept of it is it will get better over time. And I do kind of think that it is the assuming that the icons that are in right now, which are generally flat, and well, I don't know if I want to go there, but here's the idea is inline SVG, that's one of the many ways you can use SVG. If you have an SVG file, .svg, just on your system somewhere, and that's just a normal image format, Adobe Illustrator speaks SVG, it's just a thing. You can literally put it in an image tag, img, with a source of .svg, and use SVG that way. You can link it from your CSS and give a background image and link right to that CSS file. That's one of the ways you can use SVG. You can put it in an object tag, which is has its uses occasionally, but you can also just if you were to open up that .svg file and look at it in a text editor, it has a literally SVG tag in there and all kinds of paths and polygons and shapes and stuff. It's a markup language to describe vector artwork. You can take that, copy and paste it right into some HTML, and it will also render that SVG. It's like a document within a document thing. So that's what inline SVG is all about. It's like, take this, the information that actually describes how to draw these vector shapes and just put them right in the document. Yeah. And that's what you're saying, that I don't know, it's got to be in the DOM like that. There's advantages to that. It's kind of like data URIs are occasionally popular. It's, if you were take a JPEG and open it up in your text editor, it's all just, it's just gibberish. There's nothing you can do with it. You can put that in the document too. It's less common, but it's kind of neat, because the advantage is being that the browser doesn't have to make an HTTP request to go get that. It's embedded right in there.
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of idea with SVG, but what's kind of nice about it being in the DOM in the case of SVG is that you get access to, it's a markup language, there's a path element and polygon and shape and rectangle and stuff. Those things can have class names. You can target them with CSS like you can any other element. So that way you can be like, okay, this is a little robot, and his little left wheel has a class name of left wheel. I can target that in CSS and change the color, change the stroke, change the filter that gets applied. You can do all this stuff to it that you can't really do any other way. So it has all these advantages. It's really neat. And the only reason that in that article I'm saying, well, okay, you got to take it all and you got to chuck it at the top of your document in a big chunk like that. The only reason that you have to do that is because of browser bugs. Like IE chokes on it if you do it other way. But what's kind of neat is you can take all these icons. If you're thinking of it as a set and be like, here's a Twitter icon and a CodePen icon and whatever. You can put them at the top of your document and put them in a defs tag, an SVDEFS, and that just says, don't display this right now. I'm just defining it so that I can use it later. So you don't have to drop, like if you're going to use a CodePen icon 3 times on your site, you only have to define it once, and then you can use it over and over and over, which is not the case with the data URI. But it's just kind of a neat way to work. It's built to be a system, and that's why I think it is the future, because it's just makes more sense.
And you don't have these empty span tags everywhere as well.
Right, which is a span is meaningless semantically, right? It's just a span. I mean, it inherently has no meaning whatsoever. And I think there is a bit of a semantic benefit to saying, no, it's not a span, it's not nothing, it's an image.
Yeah.
It's a little better, I think.
Well, also, I think you've got to define that in your CSS too, don't you? You've either if you use like I don't know, a grunt plugin, something to render that template out. Say you have like 50 different icons, you've got to reference each one of those in your CSS file. And if you do that programmatically, or otherwise, it's gonna add up. And it actually does make sense to have it in the document, because it's not getting right. it's sort of there, but it's something you got to manage, and it's sort of I don't know. It's a funny way of doing it, really. I always thought to have an empty span and then do this content thing after it, and it's a bit
and
weird,
that's
really.
just a trick too. Really, it's just because we. Ideally, you could tell a browser speak none on any kind of element that's there. I don't know. You got to test it, and it just so happens that one of the more bulletproof ways to use the span thing with an icon font is using generated content, using a meaningless span, and ARIA hidden. What is it? ARIA hidden true, I guess, to not read it. And so and it just so happens if you do all that stuff, then accessibility-wise, it's generally okay. But it's just that's the world we live in, is fighting and testing.
All right, awesome.
So, developing for the web used to be just writing like simple HTML, and then we started to see CSS, and then more behavioral things like the use of JavaScript. But now there are so many tools that you can use in order to speed up your development process. What's your workflow for developing modern websites?
Yeah, tooling it's a big topic these days. There's this new stuff coming out all the time. I think the most important bit is that just whatever you do, you're doing it locally. Yeah, and some people are just obviously I can't believe you do it any other way. But I still talk to people all the time who they don't really have a local dev environment. They just do it some other way, direct through FTP or whatever. But I think that's the I know
that's a bit crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's old school, but it happened because it worked, and it just became, I don't know, it seems weird, but it's true. So what you need is tools to help you develop locally and make that kind of easy and painless and stuff. And there's just a million of them, and I work on lots of different sites that all have a different way to go. So I work on a Rails site, so I have a local set up for that, and I'm using a lot of command line tools and stuff. And then sometimes on the sites that I work on alone, I just want it, generally kind of easy and whatever. I'll use a tool like CodeKit to, and these CodeKit 2 just came out, and it's loaded with it's all the tools that you need all smashed in one. So I want to write with CSS preprocessors these days. It can handle that for you. I need to run a local server. It's got a local server inside of it. And
awesome.
That type of stuff. So I like it when tools make that stuff kind of easy, and that is my workflow generally. It's like whatever I need to do to make sure I can do it locally. Use the tool to do that.
Yeah. So like with CodeKit, like it's all in one place for you. You don't need to go in and start grabbing X, Y, and Z and like putting everything together like Lego. It's all there.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a really basic server, and so I have yet to build a site with its server that was the only server I could use. I still need to use a tool like MAMP. I just happen to be on a Mac, and that's the thing that whatever it is, MySQL, Apache, PHP, and stuff. It has all those dependencies. So if I were working on a WordPress site, say, I need to have a local database, and it's got to run PHP and stuff. I don't think CodeKit runs those things. So what you do is just set up the site in MAMP at whatever URL, and then you can just tell CodeKit to point at that server. So its server points at your other local server that's already set up.
It's quite interesting in PHP 5.4. You can actually spin up a PHP web server. Just on the command line, you do PHP -S and then localhost with a port, and then that terminal becomes like a PHP instance, and then it will show you like,
Nice.
it will show you like 200 codes when you hit a file, and it will show you PHP errors. And you can actually run stuff locally that way. Instead of using MAMP. So what I do with our WordPress install for CDNify, I just have like a MySQL running in the background. It's just installed on my system, and then I have a PHP server for CDNify, which I load up, and then I've got WordPress on my local machine. It's I think I prefer it to MAMP. I did used to use it, but I think that I prefer the PHP server, because then you can do it for any directory on your system, right? You can just sort of go into I don't know, documents / my awesome project, and you can just create a new server, and then it's there. Then you can hit it, and it runs PHP, and it can do all the MySQL stuff as well.
Yeah,
is really
that sounds like a smart way to go, and I'm glad they think about that stuff, and that stuff makes it into new versions of things. And I got to get more used to that. I don't know. I just got used to my little MAMP flow, and I kind of like it. Yeah, so I have, there's like 20 some sites in here in MAMP, that are they're just little things, like I'll pull a Git. I had to pull a Git repo the other day, Leah Verou's Prism, which is like a client-side syntax highlighter for blocks of code. So I'm going to make a little change to it. So I got to pull it, but there was something in it that where you can't just run it from a file URL. Usually you pull a Git repo and you need some kind of server to run whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, I should, I know I should know better and open that repo from the command line and go in there and spin up a server in there somehow, but my mind goes right to MAMP, and I go in there and invent a new little domain for it and point that at the folder, and then just open that URL that I just made locally. Well, it's just a different workflow. It accomplishes the same thing.
Well, yeah, exactly. But there's so much more to learn now. I remember writing small websites in a text editor. Now with all this additional software, it's just really like increased the complexity of the development process. Obviously you have like task runners like Grunt or Gulp, but you've got a lot of other things that are written in Node and these things. Do you think that these tools help or hinder newcomers to web design?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, the old Grunt conversation kind of. I think it's helps for the most part, because it's just like the way that CodeKit kind of brought all these tasks that we all know to be a good idea together. That's what Grunt is doing too, but just in an even nerdier, more kind of customizable way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There used to be like everybody's like, you gotta compress your images. That's so important, and it's so easy. You just gotta do it. Download, and there's 5 or so different ones. Oh, maybe there's even more. I have no idea. But they're command line tools.
Yeah.
So like I remember like there used to be this Mac app called Image Optim that came
I
out.
remember that one.
Finally, you're like, cool. Somebody made a GUI for this, so I don't have to. The day that I first downloaded Image Optim, I guarantee I didn't have the chops to install whatever command line tools needed to do it without image optim. It literally made image optimization impossible for me because I had no idea how to install a command line tool. But it's because it was awkward. You know, you have to curl it down or something, and then run commands to install it, and then it has custom commands that I have to learn custom to its little project and stuff. And that's what's cool about Grunt is that you don't have to learn any special stuff. If you just learn Grunt, then you learn how to configure the Grunt tasks. This world of tasks is open to you that all have kind of a similar interface. So you don't have to learn some new thing. You just had to learn the one thing.
So I imagine you're not a fan of Linux then, because it's just everything's so difficult to.
I have no idea. I'm not going to say I'm not a fan. That's not the path I took in life.
Yeah. It's very because I've noticed it's like if you want to use like a service that's so easy to use in Windows or Mac or wherever, when you jump to Linux, it's like you've got to run through these 20 steps just to even get it set up, and that really puts a lot of people off, I think.
But I'm sure it's not just hard on purpose, right? I mean, if you learn those 20 steps, maybe you are able to exert some more control over that environment that you couldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's a control thing as well. I mean, a lot of developers, I would say, go towards Linux because you get the opportunity to mess about with stuff then, and control the different aspects of the tool that you're using, which like you were just saying then with Image Optim, you could do loads of different things in the command line and
yeah, I'm sure, and because it's a graphic user interface, you're limited to whatever it makes available to you. And some designer somewhere may have decided that we're not going to give them access to that little feature of this thing that we're, and you wouldn't even know.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the recent trends is using JavaScript frameworks like Backbone and AngularJS. These transform traditional websites into rich single-page applications. What's your opinion on these tools, and how do you think that they impact website accessibility?
Oh, I wish I had a good answer for that. If you build an Angular app, I have no idea. I've never used either of these tools. I'm well aware of them. Just have yet to dig in a big way. Are you saying that it's 100, there is no fallback? Once you build an Angular app, you're saying the browser better have JavaScript or it doesn't work, period? Or is there a way to write an Angular app that in progressive enhancement?
I've been using Backbone recently, and basically you have these models and you have views, and views are just your DOM basically, and you can say, right, this view has an element, and then you render content into it. So you render a H1. So basically, it's very loose. So you can say this view could be a whole page, or this view could be, say, a list element or a collection of list elements, and then they're just rendered onto the page. But basically that is all loaded in through JavaScript. So they don't have anything like server-side rendering built in. So I guess what you'd have to do is you'd have to do this Backbone code to render your views, but you'd also have to have some server-side rendering as well to get the actual DOM. If you don't do the server-side rendering, if you turn off JavaScript, your website won't work.
But it's possible to do, and it's on you to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not any different than it is today. Your accessibility is your job for a website. Just because these new frameworks roll around doesn't mean it's not their fault if you build your site in such a way that's inaccessible. It might encourage that a little bit, but it's not. They're not to blame for it. I mean, or are they?
Yeah, this is what I'm trying to work out at the minute, and I don't think I've got an answer for this yet. I think it's one of those things where it's just you have to spend a lot of time to build one of these things, and you were going to spend the time in building a traditional website anyway, using the sort of the old methods of doing so. But just because you're using the new methods doesn't mean you should compromise accessibility.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I know there's like, in the Ember world, there's the classic big app that's always mentioned is Discourse, which is really nice software. I just, got a chance to use the Discourse forum the other day. And it would be interesting to try. I might just go to that forum and just turn off JavaScript and just see how it goes. Did they choose to build it in such a way that everything works still or not?
Well, we actually interviewed Jeff Atwood about Discourse, and he said essentially what it's doing is it's sending a ball of JavaScript down to the client, and once the client has the JavaScript, the whole thing works. So it would be interesting to see if you turned off the JavaScript, whether it all breaks. Would be fun to try.
Yeah, and of course we don't expect it to work exactly the same or just slower or something. It could be totally different. It could look totally different. It could be, but that would be interesting because it does kind of matter, especially for something where you're building that you're saying please use this software in which to allow other humans to communicate to each other through paragraphs.
Yeah,
like if that doesn't work, fallback. That's a thing, and I don't want to sound overly critical because I work on CodePen. Absolutely doesn't work without JavaScript. It's just not. It's not a. We did not go there. There's no progressive enhancement happening at all. For the most part, I mean, there's things that we can do better, but I think it's so. I'm not looking for an excuse, I guess, but I don't know. Maybe I am. It's you write code and it grabs it and it puts it in an iframe. I mean, there's no. If you can't use JavaScript, that there's no point to even doing that. So I think we might get a free pass.
Yeah.
Right. So moving on to the next question about website performance. I mean, I would say that it's improved dramatically over just this last decade. I mean, and we'll probably see it improve further. But it gives users a richer and better experience. So in the next few years, what do you think we will see in terms of performance, and how will it affect the end user experience?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I almost suspect, I don't spend a ton of time thinking about this, but the faster the web gets and the kind of the more we're able to do, I think we just get greedy, right? And we're like, well, let's pack more stuff in there. This is fast enough. I wonder if we'll continually shoot ourselves in the foot, over time. Hopefully it won't be too epidemic. I've seen like charts of, this is how fat our websites are becoming and kind of looking at data over time, and it looks like a, hockey stick growth of how much crap we're trying to pack into websites. And there does need to be some that just can't go on forever.
I mean, say for example, like if we doubled the amount of speed that we can have over like the
I would suspect that as a group we'll just double the size of websites.
Yeah, we can put more stuff in there. So we have to. It's like an empty space. We've got to see how much stuff we can cram. Yeah.
Sure, and part of that is just the speed of internet, but there's way more to it than that, as I'm sure you guys are well aware. There's just how fast stuff come down, but then there's like ping speed as well, and then there's just once the browser has the information, how fast is it at getting it on the screen to you? And that's just a different type of performance that people are talking about and working on, and all that stuff is hopefully going to get better over time.
Yeah, I mean, offloading your static assets onto a CDN, so that it will be delivered to your user via the server closer to them is really exciting in terms of performance, because it supercharges your content and get it much faster.
Right.
What does CDN mean to you?
I think of it as kind of a necessary thing, right? I think that it's just one of the. I like that it's been in YSlow forever and OB tools and stuff. It's like you get in trouble if your assets aren't on a CDN.
Yeah, they actually grade it, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They give you a. And what's funny is that I don't know how it knows if they're on a CDN or not. So I think you just kind of have to tell it, like, you kind of check off the box yourself, like, yep, I am doing that one. Yeah. Stop not grading, or stop grading me poorly for it. But yeah, I just think it's kind of a necessary thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in recent years like sites just go down completely because of like massive traffic spikes.
They're just a different type of server in a lot of ways, right? Like, why send a request for a simple asset through a more complex server stack than it needs to be, you know? Yeah. And you might as well serve it on one that's set up to serve assets specifically, cookie lists and all that stuff, you know? They're just better servers for assets. Even if it didn't do all the cool stuff that CDNs do, like be geographically closer and, you know, all the other cool stuff that it did. Just having a special server that's cookie list alone is worth it. Let alone all the other cool stuff they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, have you got any other questions you want to ask Chris?
No, I think that's great. I mean, it was really good to talk to you, Chris.
Same here, Chris, as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
thanks. Thanks for coming along, Chris.
Sure.